right, you guys. So I have created a timeline of sorts that basically spans a specific point in time. I would say about roughly 1,260 days and a 3.5 day duration between 64 to 70 AD. Okay, so bear with me as I go through this. This is actually done to be able to address, I think, a mistake I made surrounding the timing of when I think the two witnesses, Ananus ben Ananus and Jesus ben Gamaliel, would have been resurrected. Okay, and I'm going to get into that because I know that history doesn't mention that they were resurrected, but this is what I propose, okay? And in my previous timeline, I had indicated that they were possibly resurrected around 70 AD, and I have since made that correction on my prior timeline and updated the description of that timeline, which I call the Revelation walkthrough, where I basically break down a timeline of events in the book of Revelation from about, well, I go back as far as 63 BC onwards to where we are present day and beyond, where we, go through the Gog-Magog war, the Great White Throne Judgment, and the New Heavens and New Earth. So that is in my prior video. Check that out if you would like to. But I am actually correcting kind of the details of when I think the two witnesses would have laid in the streets and were resurrected along with the first resurrection of the elect, which I know is saying so much. And I know I'm going to catch a lot of heat for this by folks who don't believe believe that we're in Satan's season of deception right now. But I hope to be able to address these matters. Okay, so let's get into it. We're going to start from 64 AD because that is where we get really the tribulation. Okay, I'm going to just put this out there. I think that the tribulation would have started around 64 AD to 70 AD. And I really do think that we get this 1,260 days, this 3.5 year period between 64 AD and 68 AD, which is when the Neronian persecution of the church would have ramped up, would have gotten really, really intense. Okay. And then we get another 1,260 days, okay, 1,260 days of the intensification of the judgment against the Jews, including the Pharisees and Sadducees. Okay, so the 7-year tribulation that many Christians talk about, it's like they're taking this from Daniel. I believe it's was it Daniel 9 verses 27, I believe. It talks about the final week of the 490 years, or the 70 weeks by which Daniel was given that prophecy, okay, in Daniel chapter 9. But I really don't think that is the case at all. I really see history. I see what God was trying to do with Old Covenant Israel to New Covenant Israel. I see that when I look at history, I see that apparently there were no coins found minted around 67 AD in the Qumran community of the Dead Sea, which would have been also a likely place that refugees from Jerusalem would have fled. Jerusalem, Judea, and the surrounding areas. Anybody in the New Testament church that would have been able to make it to the wilderness of Judea or would have gone underground were I believe these folks would have been gathered with the elect or raptured. Okay. I also want to point out that if I'm correct, and the gathering of the elect happened around 67 AD, this would have technically have been a mid-tribulation rapture event, because the Qumran community is still a mystery. We don't know where they went. Okay, that's the reason. We don't know where the Qumran community went. And that is something that we can't just speculate and say that they left and they went prophesying and they went out there with the disciples. And they were preaching the gospel. Okay, like we don't have any record of their conversion in their own writings of necessarily conversion to Christianity. But in their writings, they were, interestingly enough, waiting for the Messiah. They were waiting for the angels to gather them. And in their writings, they were waiting for the armies of light to triumph over the armies of darkness. Okay. And so, like, I think that the Qumran community members were, in fact, and the refugees from Jerusalem and the surrounding Judean areas would have been raptured. So if we start from 64 AD, I do believe at this point, when the Neronian persecution was ramping up, that the New Testament church would have either fled into the wilderness of Judea or gone underground. Okay, by this time, by and around this time. Okay, as Nero was forcing Christians to take a mark, and if they didn't take this mark, if they didn't do and participate in any of these temple or these pagan temple rituals, take a certificate to basically say that they were a child of basically the devil. I don't know what else to say, just to kind of narrow it down. But basically, there were these rituals that the citizens of the ancient Roman Empire, they had to pledge their allegiance to the imperial cult worship, which pointed itself back to Caesar and emperor worship. And if these guys were not worshiping Nero, they were not able to buy and sell at this time. So the Christians that were refusing to worship Nero were persecuted and killed horrifically. It's also noteworthy to say that I believe that the book of Revelation had been finished, having been written in 64 AD. I don't know why folks lose their minds. If you guys see my comments in my past videos, you'll see like the kind of flack that I've been receiving over this. I don't know why it's such a strange thing to say, that or to deduce that by 64 AD the book of Revelation had been completed. I don't believe that Paul would have been in his 90s. I don't believe that John would have been in his 90s and finishing up the book of Revelation, or somebody else completed it at say 80-90 or 80-95. I hear that and I'm like, no, that doesn't make any sense to the events that were happening or about to imminently happen, as we see in Revelation chapter 1 mention of that a lot of these events were going to happen imminently. And so no, I believe that John would have finished writing the book of Revelation by about 62 AD. And by 64 AD, the letters would have been circulated, in the ancient Roman Empire. And thank God for that he was preparing the New Testament church for what was to come. So, okay. Now, the seal and trumpet judgments, I believe, happened between 66 to 70 AD. Okay. So where I want to be able to clarify again, is that I had placed in my previous video, the death, at least the resurrection of Ananus ben Ananus and Jesus ben Gamaliel, close to around and after April of 70 AD. I actually think that these guys, when I actually double checked my information, these guys were killed around 67 to 68 AD, hence why I have them here. And what the major event that would have happened at around this time would have been Purim, which would have been a festival at around that time. And I believe that 3.5 days into this period, the two witnesses would have been resurrected, and not only they would have been resurrected, but also the first resurrection of the elect would have taken place at this time. Yes, the same resurrection of the elect that John mentions, okay, that Paul mentions. So I do believe that this event would have happened at around this time. So now this begs the obvious question: why has nobody ever reported this? If this was the case, why hasn't this ever been mentioned in history? To be honest, it's not outside the realm of possibility that the first resurrection already would have occurred at this time. If Ananias ben Ananias and Jesus ben Gamaliel were resurrected at this time, I don't think Josephus would have mentioned it in the War of the Jews. I think he would have just heard it as a rumor, as a speculation. And also, it's also possible that the witnesses who saw this resurrection come to pass ended up dying by 70 AD when the Idumeans came and attacked Jerusalem, and with all of the civil unrest that was going on between the Jewish zealots, Idumeans, and moderates. They would have probably died, is what I'm thinking. And it's around this time, actually, that when these guys are killed, interestingly enough, the Idumeans were able to come into the city and start their raids and their attacks. Really what was holding them back were these two witnesses, but once they were killed, then they were able to come in and cause increasing and, as I have it here, catastrophic civil unrest. Okay, so but this would have happened, I think, after this time. Okay, so this is why I put these things in question marks, because I'm still working it out. I'm still trying to figure it out. I'm trying not to honestly force any of I'm trying to be as very objective as possible. But they were killed around 67, 68 AD. And from what I gather as well, that the Idumeans would have come in at around that time. So that's why I think that this is definitely a better place to put this particular event between 67 and 68 AD. All right, we know that Emperor Nero commits suicide. That doesn't change, and Jerusalem falls. Okay, so this is just kind of what I wanted to mention as well. It was that I do believe that the Son of Man being seen in the clouds, something that Tacitus also recorded, the Roman historian Tacitus recorded, and Josephus recorded. I think that this event would have happened at around between 67 and 68 AD, or at least between 66 and between midway point between 66 and at least the midway point between 67 and 68 AD, around this time frame here. Okay. Let me know what you think in the comments below, especially when I also say, that that there was about 1,260 days of intense judgment against the Jews leading up to 70 AD. It was a really, really bad time for them, but they were being judged. And it just seemed like even nature was against them. There were earthquakes and storms that were happening around this time that obviously led to the Idumeans being able to come in and create a lot of problems for the people in Jerusalem, even for themselves, because they were even destroying grain supplies. So, the nation was further put into famine, and they were really desperate times. Let me know what you think anyway, and I will see you in the next video.